fentanyl, take a pin, put a little tiny piece of fentanyl on the top of that pin, and that can kill 5 people. Put a little bit more, it can kill the entire town. This is what we're dealing with.
There's pretty much nobody in America who hasn't touched opioid addiction in some way. All the brothers and sisters, the family, everybody is suffering. In the United States, we have over 1 million deaths from this drug.
Sir, wake up, can you hear me?
February 2025. A newly re-elected President Donald Trump orders a covert spy operation over Mexico.
What can you tell us about the CIA drone flights over Mexico? Is this the next step in the war against the cartels?
Well, we're going to see. I think Mexico is largely run by the cartels, and that's a sad thing to say.
Millions of North Americans have been poisoned on a massive scale for 30 years. One of the biggest crimes of our times.
We will immediately stop the drugs pouring across our border. That's a war.
And the enemy is Mexican drug dealers.
The opioid crisis began apparently south of the border. Is that right?
The opioid crisis began with prescription opioid, with Purdue's misconduct.
But they were located south of the border, right?
No, they were not. They were located right in New York.
Oh my gosh.
Here's where it all began 30 years ago. The northeastern US, a long way from Mexico. Purdue Pharma, a multinational pharmaceutical firm run by a respectable family, the Sacklers.
We knew that we were going up against a very powerful interest. The Sacklers, one of the wealthiest families in the entire world.
The Sacklers polished their reputation by donating millions of dollars to museums and universities.
They look like very responsible people, but they were full of shit.
The Sacklers' business was pain.
This medication does not turn you into a zombie.
They used an old analgesic, oxycodone. Like many other painkillers, it's derived from opium.
OxyContin, tramadol, opioids are very closely related to heroin.
Oxycodone was known as Eucodal in the 1940s and had famous users.
Hitler's doctor used it to keep him in shape and make him happy. Because starting in '43, he couldn't have been too happy with how things were developing.
Purdue Pharma revolutionized drug marketing in America. We create an enormous new population of opioid-addicted American consumers.
I blame Big Pharma. They put that OxyContin out there and lied about it, saying that it wasn't addictive, and doctors were just doing their jobs.
Shame on Sackler! Shame on Sackler! Shame on Sackler! Sackler family!
No longer the Sackler family must pay!
If anyone could explain me the difference between McKinsey, Big Pharma, Opioid Cartel, and the organizations of people like Pablo Escobar, I'm all ears.
I should have been less denial of my first intuition. and I should have listened to that inner voice inside of me.
Philadelphia was Carol Panara's district 20 years ago. She was a Purdue sales rep. And now this poor part of the city is ravaged by a mixture of opioids and animal tranquilizers.
At the time, Purdue Pharma were expanding. They were going to hire about 110 new salespeople throughout the country. Every pharmaceutical company starts their representatives with 2 or 3 weeks training. I went to training at headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. The minute I walked in the room, I didn't feel very good about it. I didn't know if it was nerves, but I just had a bad feeling. I didn't like the vibe. It's very nebulous what I'm saying, but we were told specific things like do not abbreviate OxyContin as Oxy. Don't refer to it as Oxy in your call notes, because that's what they call it on the street. There was always this feeling of suspicion and paranoia. I scolded myself mentally, and I said, you got to give it a chance. This is new.
Would you state your name, please?
Richard Sackler.
You are here today to give testimony in a case pending against Purdue. You're aware of that?
That's my understanding.
I want to show you an email. Let's mark this Exhibit 2 to the deposition. It says, "You won't believe how committed I am to make OxyContin a huge success. It is almost that I dedicated my life to it." When you say you dedicated your life to it and that you have no time for your private life, what were your day-to-day activities with respect to OxyContin?
Well, may I read the whole document? I haven't seen this for 16 years.
The company's sales reps would target physicians. Their mission, convince doctors to prescribe OxyContin.
Are you ready to rock?
You were not aware at this time that your company was committing a felony in how they were marketing and branding the drug.
I was not aware at all of what you're saying. Enthusiasm building. I don't regret trying to energize our sales force. I think that was my mission.
Sales reps could double their salaries through bonuses. The more drugs they got doctors to prescribe, the more they earned.
We were out promoting this product. We were lying to the doctors without knowing that we were lying to the doctors. Gotta live with yourself, right?
Some patients may be afraid of taking opioids because they're perceived as too strong or addictive. But that is far from actual fact.
In the 1990s, Purdue sales reps descended on one of the poorest regions in the United States, Appalachia. And signs of the opioid epidemic are still apparent 3 decades later.
Trenton Howard died yesterday.
Oh, Jesus.
You know how many friends I had die last year?
We had a couple, several.
Okay.
4 to 5 at least.
I'm telling you, I had 19 friends die last year. I know, 19 friends died last year. Opiates is the worst thing that ever happened to this place, man. It's the worst thing that ever happened to this place. It's destroying our country. It really is. It's destroying good people, good homes.
Now it's been 20 years since I practiced medicine, but even now, decades later, I still see people that I encounter who were patients of mine who have struggled. I've encountered families of patients who I prescribed to and overdosed and died. And the only people downtown are struggling folks, and they can all point toward addiction as the struggle. Poor, addicted, mentally ill people. That seems like the folks that are left in Clarksburg. I came in 1978 to Clarksburg, West Virginia, and I was a family practice resident. At that time, Clarksburg was a vibrant community. We had glass factories, we had coal mines, we had a lot of retail. Things were very good and very stable.
But today, much of the work is done by machine.
Coal mines certainly changed. The glass factories began to close. Until the 90s, they were done. It was just one factory after another. It was just one job loss after another. And folks got very hopeless. And we were economically depressed, but I would say that as a community, we became depressed also.
Did you have the feeling that West Virginia was targeted by the industry?
I don't know that. I don't know what the internal mechanisms of the pharmaceutical companies and what they did about that. We were an area for the perfect storm, and they were part of the storm. So whether there was intentionality, I don't know that.
Dr. Ortenzio didn't know it, but he'd been identified as a GP who could potentially be swayed by Purdue's sales reps. His name was found on one of their lists.
There was a massive increase in pharmacologic agents.
Let me tell you about the medication, and then I'm going to come back and tell you about what we have to offer.
I like it.
It's okay.
You'll see that. I can see myself prescribing it, that's for sure.
Sometimes there were 20 reps a day. The pharmaceutical reps who were older men when I started became younger women.
Hi, doctor. Nice to see you today. Nice to see you.
We had training on things like the psychology of different personalities that you're dealing with and how to approach them.
They were sidling up, making friends, talking about interests in common.
You know, some doctors were more analytical than others. Others were more relationship.
And they were nice guys too. I mean, they're good guys. And they were very sincere. At least it seemed that way. I was the kind of guy who wanted to make people happy. I wanted happy patients who were free of symptoms. And if they could be pain-free and not suffer, gosh, that was a great thing. So these pain medications came on.
I had a work accident and I broke a rib. The doctor prescribed me OxyContin. I would take one every 6 hours as needed for pain. Well, I realized that if you take 3 every 6 hours, whether you're using pain or not, it felt pretty good.
But Dr. Lou Ortenzio saw his patients change during their treatment.
People became very demanding. I just want my medication, doctor. Give me some refills too, because I know I don't want to bother you.
Pills. I need pills. I need my opiate. I need it. I gotta have it. Do whatever I gotta do to get it, no matter what it is.
And doctor, I'm better. I can go to work. Doctor, I can support my family. You know, doctor, you can't stop this medicine or I'll get sick.
When you're addicted to opiates, you ain't got nobody but opiates, man. It's your only friend. And it's your only friend and your biggest enemy.
Four years after launching OxyContin, the Sacklers realized they had developed what's known in the pharma industry as a blockbuster. They'd conquered the US market. Why not the whole world?
Me duele.
Me duele.
Me duele. How many companies were involved in the production, manufacturing, or distribution of OxyContin?
Could you specify the geography?
In the world?
Many. I've never counted them.
The same playbook used that worked in the US, being used effectively in many countries.
Different countries, different names.
What is Mundipharma?
Mundipharma is
England, Sweden, Switzerland, Norway, the Netherlands, and France.
The Sackler family owned Mundipharma.
Yes.
The Swiss say if you prescribe a patient one drug, that's fine. If you prescribe them 2, you should have them see a psychiatrist. Prescribe 3, and you need to see a psychiatrist.
Jacques Puimayou is a doctor from Toulouse. He was surprised by the glamorous lifestyle the sales reps offered him.
We were pampered by the drug maker, who paid for trips to international conventions in the United States, the Czech Republic, Turkey, and even France. We were surprised, both the luxury and that they picked up the tab. They told us OxyContin wasn't very addictive, so we started prescribing it. And we actually had good results with it. We were very satisfied. But then as time passed, I started to have some doubts. I had 2 patients with renal insufficiency who had to be resuscitated after an overdose. We realized we must have missed something.
Doctors started to get worried when they saw their patients becoming addicted.
So they would give us new ways to overcome the objections that the doctors would have.
Dr. Alan Spanos is a pain specialist.
Purdue paid him to doctor the facts.
So there was this whole concept of pseudo-addiction.
Pseudo-addiction is when a patient is looking like a drug addict because they're pursuing pain relief. So pseudo-addiction is relief-seeking behavior mistaken as drug addiction.
Basically what we started, explaining through our marketing efforts to the doctors, oh no, doctor, that's not an addictive patient.
That's not causing addiction. It won't cause addiction. It'll only control the patient's pain.
That's a pseudo-addiction. It looks like addiction, but it's not.
And doctor, if the patient still has pain after you prescribe that, that means they're having breakthrough pain. You should increase the dose. And you can safely do this. These drugs are not addictive. We have studies that show that they're not addictive.
Less than 1% of patients taking opioids actually become addicted.
And so one day, I asked the medical representatives if they had the documents on this. They gave me the official ones they had. I had a really good relationship, and still do, with the person who came to see us. She gave me a confidential file. And when you actually read all of the publications, you realize they didn't mean anything.
Pseudo-addiction is really the sign of addiction. There's no pseudo here.
Exactly. There's no such thing as pseudo-addiction. That sounds like bullcrap.
Why'd she give it to you, knowing it'd show her vulnerability?
Out of sympathy. Because she told me, above all, not to show it to anyone.
But the French doctor didn't obey her instructions. He published his revelations in a small medical journal. The subscribers are confidential, but the article didn't escape the drug maker's attention.
"10 days later, we received a registered letter from a law firm who told us to choose a defense attorney wisely, because the company would be taking legal action.
Did that stress you out?
Of course, it stresses you.
European authorities began to make it harder to prescribe OxyContin, but in North America, its use spread far and wide.
10731. Yes, hurry.
Is he blue?
He's white.
How old is he?
Oh, God, he's dead.
Ma'am, I need you to calm down. How old is he?
In my first couple of weeks in the field, I go out to talk to a doctor, and I had a field training representative with me, and the doctor pulls us aside and says, "Look, I'm not prescribing your medication anymore. My niece overdosed on your drug last weekend and died." And that really hit us pretty hard. So that was really my first experience in finding out that the product that we were doing led to something like that. We let the company know that this happened. The company's position at that time was, that's an isolated issue, that's not the drug's fault. Over the next few months, more and more reports just kept coming up from different doctors.
OxyContin is obviously the street drug. Issues like purposely crushing the 40 milligram and 80 milligram tabs to, quote, get high.
The doctors were beginning to learn that, hey, if I prescribe this drug, it's going to get diverted or it's going to get abused.
Were you aware that that was a concern in November of 1999?
No.
The company's position at that time was, well, that's abuse, that's, somebody doing something illegal with it. Well, you could sell through this.
Richard Sackler told his troops in an email to hammer on the abusers, branding addicts as reckless criminals.
Going through that, I can remember having a sense of I probably helped to cause the situation that led to them getting the drugs they got. And it burns you. Okay, I'm actually fixing this. I'm bringing to the world the knowledge that this company has done something that is extraordinarily bad. They have manipulated the entire industry into believing that this product was safe and effective. Nope.
Dr. Lou Ortenzio was treating one addict after another in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Purdue reps showered him with free samples of opioids. His cupboard was overflowing. He quickly lost control.
At the end of a hard, tough day, when I had a headache or I felt really stressed, I began to take all the samples that I had, and my drug use expanded from one sample pain pill at the end of the day to 20, 30, 40 a day. And then finally, when I just wrote prescriptions and filled them at pharmacies fraudulent names, actually my children's names were a lot of them, because dope sickness is a really miserable feeling. Coming down off of this stuff was horrible. It was a feeling I would never want to feel again. You'll do anything to get more pain medication, more medication to make that dope sickness go away. Again, you lose your whole judgment and moral compass. And I was a drug addict, and I was treating drug addicts.
You know, he asked no questions.
Oxy spread everywhere, becoming more and more accessible. Too accessible.
I got a call from my daughter. Dad, Eddie's not breathing and he's turning blue. I was like, call 911. Hopped into a cab, hurry, praying. I see an ambulance in front of my house. I said, thank you, God. But as I got closer, I saw two guys sitting in front of the ambulance. And I looked at them, and they said, sorry, sir. I said, don't tell me he's dead. They said, sorry, sir, nothing we could do. Grief waves. No one knows who wrote it. But they said when a tragedy like this happens at first, it's like you're drowning. And then slowly the waves start hitting you every 10 seconds. And then every minute. And then after a while, maybe it's every 5 minutes. I remember the first time I went an hour without thinking about Eddie. And when I realized it, I actually felt guilty. I knew Eddie and his friends had a party the night before because they were all from school. A police sergeant came in, tell me what he did. They said an oxy. I said, what the hell's an oxy? And he said, OxyContin. Kids are dying left and right from this. How did I never hear about this drug? Then I started to dig a little deeper. My first website was called oxykills.com. I realized this story was so much bigger than my son. I think right there, it's like a little voice in my head said, you gotta warn the kids.
Ed Bish.
The second protest against Purdue Pharma. And all of a sudden, we see this girl come out, and she said, sorry, they're making me do this. Do what? The sprinklers come on. It wasn't the girl's fault, but you know who put them up.
The epidemic inspired a generation of young attorneys to rise up against the Sacklers. The fight would define many of their lives, including that of attorney Maura Healy.
America, it's our Independence Day, our celebration, so lots of fireworks. I wish, we had planned, and as you may know, I have to go to the White House later today to meet with the president, so it's kind of crazy right now.
Healy is now the governor of Massachusetts. Her career has been forged by her fight against the Sacklers.
Oh, Danielle, thanks a million, okay? Happy 4th. In 2014, I was running for election to become Attorney General in Massachusetts. I spent a lot of time visiting cities and towns, meeting people all around the state. And after every meeting, somebody would come up to me and talk about their son or their daughter who is addicted, who is suffering from opioid addiction. Some told me stories about their loved ones dying from opioids. We know we have a problem with Oxy. We know it is killing people. And we also know that there is one company and one family really at the heart of this. One of the things that I thought was really important in terms of accountability and justice was making sure that the truth get out there. The Sackler family, for the very first time, had to face what they had done in a very, very public way.
The Sacklers were obliged to explain themselves before Congress after a quarter of a century of silence.
Please raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, if nothing but the truth, so help me God?
I do.
We knew that we were going up against a very powerful interest. The Sacklers had billions and billions of dollars. They were one of the wealthiest families in the entire world. They were going to come at us hard and do everything in their power to try to get us off of the case. And that's what they did.
When were you first notified that the U.S. attorneys for the Western District of Virginia were investigating Purdue?
That the investigation turned on Purdue was a surprise, but I don't remember when that happened.
The surprise came in 2006. Two little-known federal prosecutors in Virginia had discreetly looked into the drug in their region. They wanted to put the Sacklers on trial to put an end to the opioid epidemic. They drafted a more than 100-page memo and sent it to a high-ranking official in Washington. Paul Peltier, chief of the Department of Justice's Criminal Fraud Section.
I was in the Department of Justice for almost 25 years at this point. Never seen one that long. Is made up of all the evidence. The memo put forth a compelling case that Purdue Pharma had corrupted the FDA, an employee named Wright.
Curtis Wright was the FDA medical officer who oversaw the approval of OxyContin.
The Food and Drug Administration is the United States government agency. His job was to make sure that the science verified that the medicine was both safe and effective.
Did you ever discuss with Curtis Wright studies could have been done on the abuse potential of OxyContin prior to the release of OxyContin?
No.
Curtis Wright paid a secret visit to a hotel to meet representatives from Purdue Pharma just before the drug's market launch in 1995. He was supposed to be an independent and impartial federal employee, but it's believed Wright let them help him draft his medical officer reviews, and he approved OxyContin's misleading package insert.
Who wrote the specs? Was it Purdue or was it the FDA?
His report was actually written by Purdue, or certainly with help from Purdue. That's something that never should have happened.
They had corrupted him into approving the drug. Then they hired him thereafter and paid him a ton of money in the corruption process.
He's the guy that now works for Purdue Pharma, correct?
He was hired by Purdue Pharma maybe 3 years after this. I don't recall exactly.
They looked like very responsible people, but they were full of They were full of
Curtis Wright started working for Purdue Pharma about a year after retiring from the FDA. An interview with Curtis Wright at his home in 2023.
Oh, no regrets. I did my job. I never saw anything that I would not want to do. It is a difficult, terrible situation. I do not know what the truth is. I do not know what the truth is.
They knew that people were dying from their drug. They knew that the more you took, the more you'd want later. And they knew it was wrong.
The case against Purdue looked solid and well-researched. An indictment and subsequent trial were the only logical progression. Game over for OxyContin and the burgeoning opioid epidemic. But a higher authority intervened just as charges were being brought.
Then something very weird happened, right? All of a sudden, there was another meeting in the office. Secret deal. It was people from the Deputy Attorney General's office, underneath the Attorney General. Strange, never happened before. And then we heard they're not gonna let you go forward with the indictment and no criminal prosecution against Purdue Pharma.
One could interpret that as the government is helping Purdue.
That's exactly what happened. Rudy Giuliani was representing Purdue Pharma at the time. He was also speculated to be the next nominee for president of the United States. I would call it moneyed influence, wealthy lawyer, wealthy corporation influence.
There would be no trial. 3 executives admitted that Purdue fraudulently marketed OxyContin by falsely claiming it was less addictive than other pain medications, and they cut a plea deal to avoid jail with fines.
None of this would have happened if the brass at the DOJ would not have buried that memo and they would have received jail time. This whole opioid epidemic could have been curbed, curtailed, cut off at the knees in 2007.
Purdue and 3 of its executives were fined $634.5 million, a fraction of the $10 billion they'd made from the addictive painkillers.
Corporations look at these fines simply as paying a speeding ticket, and then they go on. But if you can't prosecute the Sacklers, what you're telling the world, and what actually happened, is that you're slapping these people on the wrists.
You would think if you sign a settlement agreement with the United States Department of Justice for selling drugs and for marketing drugs in a way that's illegal, unlawful, you would have thought they might have stopped doing that. Instead, what did Purdue and the Sacklers do? They doubled down.
Purdue board member David Sackler sent a worried email to the rest of the family a week after the plea deal was announced. It suggested they make as much money as possible before lawsuits ruined them. The email was eventually leaked to members of Congress.
Mr. Sackler, do you recognize this message?
I'm not sure I can read that.
On May 17th, 2007, you wrote an email to your family. What do you think is going on in all these courtrooms right now? We're rich. For how long? Until which suit gets through to the family. Did you write that email?
I believe so, yes.
I think they kind of knew that maybe their time was limited. This was not going to be forever. And so they had to squeeze as much out of it as they could.
Were you trying to cash out profits so that opioid victims couldn't claim them in future lawsuits?
I think you've mischaracterized that email. That's my belief. And I believe the distribution...
The emails speak for themselves.
So they decided to do exactly what they weren't supposed to do.
They looked to sell and pump and market more Oxy than ever before.
If you look at the charts, literally after the settlement in 2007, the sales and profits go up like a hockey stick. It's unbelievable.
All of a sudden, your company went from stewardship of Purdue Pharma, taking out $120 million over 10 years, to $10.4 billion over 10 years. What happened?
What happened was the Sackler family brought in the professionals. Then Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey discovered that the Sacklers had hired one of the world's top management consulting firms.
McKinsey's involvement was all secret. Nobody knew that McKinsey was advising Purdue and the Sacklers.
I've often joked that they have more secrets than our Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. Well, of course, they work for the CIA as well. They've advised them. McKinsey played a huge role in Purdue Pharma's business.
We're a firm of people who like helping other people. And primarily, we help leaders.
Their job is to give advice for a lot of money.
They work for governments around the world. France, obviously, Germany, the United States, Russia, Saudi Arabia. They work for companies, the biggest companies, Fortune 500 companies.
I'm an optimist. I believe in the power for us to find new, innovative solutions to the world's toughest problem.
They work for everybody. They are everywhere.
I've apologized for our work with Purdue and other opioid manufacturers. We fully recognize that it fell short of our standards. I think we failed to recognize the broader context of what was going on in society around us.
McKinsey's global managing partner had to answer to the US House Oversight Committee in April 2022. Bob Sternfels tried to say as little as possible, but when he couldn't recall figures, Maura Healy was happy to help.
How much money was your firm paid by Purdue and other opioid manufacturers?
Congresswoman, I don't have that number today, if that's of interest.
Attorney General Healy, how much money was McKinsey paid?
$86 million. We have documents from McKinsey where McKinsey is telling Purdue and the Sacklers how to turbocharge sales of Oxy.
McKinsey comes up with lots of ideas. They put them on these slides. It's always on the PowerPoint slides, right?
He's being honest guy.
America was about to learn the creative ways they'd turbocharge sales.
And one of the proposals they came up with was the idea that pharmaceutical companies could get some sort of refund if the sales had led to deaths or overdose.
The proposed bonus was apparently up to $14,000, but was never implemented.
I was like, wow. Paying a bonus when someone died of their drug.
It's important to note that these companies did not adopt this policy.
Not even Purdue Pharma went through with that plan.
I think we failed to recognize the broader context of what was going on in society around us.
To me, that's trafficking, correct? Aren't you guys trafficking?
I wouldn't say that our work on any aspect of sales and marketing is trafficking.
If anyone could explain me the difference between McKinsey, Big Pharma, Opioid Cartel, and the organizations of people like Pablo Escobar, I'm all ears. I really am. Y'all may be wearing suits and you may be having these fancy offices, but you're doing the same freaking thing.
McKinsey didn't act alone. They were aided by others.
The American subsidiary of French ad agency Publicis helped McKinsey sell its message.
We are the wow. Because every idea, every little piece of creation should have a rock and roll moment.
The campaign, I remember, featured this person named Ken, who is this good-looking sales rep from Purdue, whose job was to get up in the morning, drink coffee, get pumped up on music, and go out to doctors' offices, almost like a gladiator, to get those doctors, to convince those doctors to prescribe more and more Oxy.
Net effect, though, was to create, of all of this, doctors nationwide being pushed to prescribe these pills because they know the drugs will do the job for you. And so the supply nationwide just went like this. It's like an airplane taking off.
The profits were astronomical and probably partially stashed beyond the reach of the American justice system.
How much of your family's wealth is currently in foreign bank accounts?
Of our family's wealth, I don't believe a very small amount, if any.
We know that the Sackler family, for a long time, it's been their practice to hide money, hide assets offshore, and that makes it very difficult as a matter of investigation and recovery of those assets.
How many shell companies do you and your family control?
That's really a question for the lawyers. We're involved in a confidential mediation.
I hated my job. I didn't want to get up in the morning. I'm so unhappy here, and I don't feel good about what I'm doing. So I called my manager, and I just said, I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice. I'm done. I can't do this.
It was early in the morning. Feds raided my office. The United States FBI, the Office of the Inspector General, the IRS, the Drug Task Force, the DEA, all came into my office. But it was horrific, it was very scary. Lost my medical license because I was convicted of 2 federal felonies, a prescription fraud and insurance fraud. So there I was, 52 years old, no license, no job, and that's over 20 years ago. This is my 20-year Celebrate Recovery coin. I've been clean and sober by the grace of God for 20 years. I was an early casualty of and contributor to the opioid epidemic. But it's great to still be in the same town where my practice hurt people, now trying to help people. Again, that's all part of that redemption. Taking that disaster that was there before and turning it into something positive. The 3 of us got to the point where addiction was going to take our lives. We have to get to the point where we recognize that we're powerless. We can't control it. You and prosper in Jesus' name.
It's your sister?
And my sister, yeah.
You started with Oxy?
Doctor give me pain pills, when they cut you off pain pills, you find something else for pain, Which me was OxyContin, and then from OxyPerk, and then this led to fentanyl, heroin. I'm strong, I'm prostitute and everything. These were my pimps.
Around this way, yeah. From Brownsville.
I'm gonna take my sister right here, and I'm gonna find a way to make sure that she feels better. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go get her what she needs to make her feel better. Because I love her. I want her to feel better. I don't want her to be sick. Okay? I love you. Later.
How did France avoid this epidemic?
We have very strict regulations that protect people despite everything. It's annoying for everyone, for the doctor, for the patient, for the pharmacist who must do the monitoring, but it's still a good thing. It's a safeguard and one that's increasingly necessary, especially now that we have this unbridled pursuit of profit.
It's the problem with corporate America, right? Where you have some corporations that don't have a moral center. They don't have a tone at the top of someone who is moral and just and cares about people.
Clearly, the product's success in treating patients in pain, which is indisputable.
And that's why in the United States we have over 1 million deaths from this drug.
You can kill somebody and take away their pain, but that certainly wouldn't be effective, would it?
I don't think that death would be considered a sign of efficacy.
And pretty soon you begin to see the Mexican trafficking world wake up to this new market. They begin to say, wow, this is important.
I have tried to figure out, is there anything that I could have done differently, knowing what I knew then?
I think we failed to recognize the broader context of what was going on in society around us.
Purdue and the Sacklers and the opioid manufacturers and distributors started something that continues to this day because people moved from oxy and opioids to fentanyl, for example, and other synthetics. And to this day, we deal with a fentanyl epidemic across the United States. It's one that started with oxy.
Bailamos al compás de los que ya no están en el salón de duelo. No hay final ni mañana. El negocio prospera mientras lloran al cielo. El banquero de la barca siempre